What's up, Pod Pals? It's your buddy Adam from Podcasting Business School, the show where I teach podcasters how to love their podcast like a hobby and build it like a business. And today we are talking about a topic that has never been covered in the 400 plus episodes of Podcasting Business School. Should you turn your podcast content into a blog? I have been exploring this vein of the marketing world. Again, I did this with my health podcast. I did like 300, almost 400 blogs. Before I get too deep into the blogging weeds, I'm like, I got to talk to my girl, Kathy Koliakovo. She knows what she's talking about when it comes to the blogging world. So I invited Kathy on. She's the host of Marketing Your Private Practice, a great podcast. So Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adam. Great to be back here.
Yes. So you're one of my Download Growth Club members. We talk all the time. I really enjoy getting your insight. One of the things that makes the Download Growth Club so cool is we have people like yourself in there that are just freaking experts at what you do. And there's been a few posts when somebody's posted a question, I had my 10 cents, but you will drop like $1 million in value. I'm like, that person doesn't realize they just got like $1,000 consult in that post there from Kathy. So anyway, I always appreciate your insight and input. So I'm really excited for this session because blogging is a thing where I believe there's some opportunity there. It's at least worth exploring this idea. And that's what we're here to do today. So let's get into this topic a little bit here, Kathy.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Are you serious? You've never covered this on your podcast?
100%. 100% correct.
Oh, okay. I can't deal with that.
All right. So let's look at just some of the benefits of potentially turning a podcast into a blog. You do this with you're great at showing your clients and people that follow you on social how you can do like non-social media things to grow your business and your company. So what we should be looking at or looking forward to potentially turning our podcast into a blog.
So here's the thing. The biggest thing about it, and if the word blog scares you, because I always say people look at it as a 4-letter word, because they do get worried about it.
Yeah.
You have to look at it as just a way of marketing your business. So don't think about it as a blog. It is just another avenue to market your business, but you're putting it in a place and in a format where not only can people looking for you and looking for solutions to the problems they have, which ideally you have for them, they'll be able to find you, but the search engines can find you too. And I know that the search engines will pick up your podcast webpage, whether you have it on Libsyn, Buzzsprout, all of that. You've got it in your podcast titles. I mean, you're big on SEO in your podcast titles and descriptions, which is one of the things that made me appreciate you and decide to work with you. But if that's all you're doing, you're skipping out on the most important aspect of SEO and making the search engines happy, in that you're not bringing traffic back to your own domain, which is the one asset that you own. You don't own the site you have on Libsyn or Apple or Spotify or Buzzsprout, whatever it is you're using. You don't own them, but you own your domain. So now if you're blogging and putting your show notes on your website, on your domain, you're bringing traffic back to you. You're getting a history. You're getting the traffic. You're getting the items that the search engines are looking for. You're putting consistent new keyword-rich content on your website. When you don't blog, you're skipping out on that. And what happens with that is it helps bring your website up in the rankings. It helps you get a better domain authority and page authority. And that's what's going to help you get more traffic from strangers than anything else.
Yeah. And that's, we talk about FOMO, fear of missing out, all the time. And I feel like I go through this process of like, I get the FOMO and I'm like, all right, do I have time for this right now? Is the fear of missing out greater than the amount of time I can actually put into this? And I keep going back and forth. And eventually I was like, I got to the blog thing. I'm like, I think I can do this in a effective way, potentially. So what really tipped me over, I was like, my newsletter, it gets really great open rates. I get great engagement off of it. And I've developed this little technique of writing something in there that isn't necessarily covered directly in the podcast or on social media or whatever. It's something that they only get in that newsletter. So I'm like, that's written form. Why don't I take that and put that and make that a blog? So I'd like to kind of brainstorm with you, the good, the bad, the ugly, of different ways that we could take our podcast topics and content and create a blog out of that. Like, what is a good idea? What isn't a good idea? I'll let you take it from there.
Okay. So I think you definitely should do it, and it's worth the time, because the reality is you're writing your podcast show notes anyhow, correct?
Yep.
You're writing your newsletter articles anyhow, correct? Part of the Thrive marketing method I teach is all about taking one piece of anchor content, which for you is your podcast content, right, or in your case, because you're doing what I never tell people never to do, you're doing the podcast and you're writing the newsletter, and you're not reusing both of them. So the newsletter content that you put together, which is awesome,
thank you,
it's keyword rich, it's ideal for your ideal clients, it's got good information in it. As far as I'm concerned, you're sticking it in the email and throwing it down the toilet after that because you don't use it. So you're wasting content to me. And that's what I try to help people avoid. So my process is all about writing that anchor piece, then repurposing it. So it goes as show notes on your website, which is what we call a blog for a podcast, basically. Right. It goes as the content you're going to pull out of that to create your social media posts. Some of them are going to send people back to the site to visit the show notes page, to find the podcast, to listen to it, to get the resources. Some of it will just be educational pieces you're going to pull out of it. So when you don't repurpose and reuse all that content, that's where people get stuck in an endless cycle of creating more and more content than you actually need to effectively market your business. So why not take your podcast content, break it up a bit, make some show notes for you use Libsyn, I think. So yep, put it for your podcast there that you put there, which then goes out onto all the platforms. Make a different version or even the exact version. If you check my show notes on Buzzsprout, they are pretty much the same as what goes on my website as the show notes page.
Okay.
There's some different things that I add in, but they're set things that we don't change every week. So there are things, it's easy. We have a template. A template save you time. That's what their job is. So when you have that, then you also use that same content and you create the social media content and follow your 72-hour window of marketing podcast and use all that to get them back there. But part of the process means that some of your marketing is not sending people to Apple. It's sending them back to your website, to your domain, where you're starting to get the traffic. And if you're being effective with how you put those together, you're going to have some of the elements in them that I like to see. Some of them are for the search engines, some of them for people visiting. So you have them on your page. You have another resource for them, another podcast to listen to. So you send them over to that page where you have the show notes. And now they've spent a little more time on your website and they've stayed there longer, something that the search engines pay attention to. So part of it is really to get the contact and the interest in the indexing by the search engines. Part of it is to build up your own reputation too. So putting them in there can be done, like I said, mine is almost a mirror. The show notes I put on Buzzsprout are almost exactly what I put on my website. And then I have a transcript page. So I tell people, if you don't want to listen in, you can go read the lesson, and I give them the transcript over there.
Okay.
And the transcript page, by the way, links back to the show notes page. So there's different ways for people to continually engage on there. Plus, my resources mentioned in the episode typically will have a call to action to maybe a lead magnet, book a free marketing review that people can do with me, or reference to another blog post. So if you're not putting your show notes on your website, in my opinion, you're skipping out on a lot of activity that doesn't take a lot more time. It's just having a system to do it. But it's activity that is going to help your domain get noticed and help your website get out there more.
Okay. As usual, lots of questions have popped up.
Sorry.
So, no, don't be sorry.
I'm a Canadian. I will apologize.
This is This is what it's all about, Kathy. All right. So I feel like we have 3 valid techniques that we've discussed so far with repurposing podcast content into blog content. So you guys can try out what I'm doing, where you kind of have like that tangential conversation. It's a little something extra, like an appetizer conversation. Write it up. Maybe you're doing a newsletter, maybe you're not, but take that, make a blog out of it, and link to the episode. Then we have show notes, and then we have transcription. And some people, that's the same thing. Like the transcription is the show notes, but sometimes it's different. So those are 3 valid ways to take podcast content and create a blog out of it. With like your transcription, are you labeling that like as a transcription blog episode? Like how do you,
No. So
how do we talk about that? Like when you introduce that to your audience, like, and this is the transcription or of this episode, or how does that all woven together?
So one of the things, because I'm a fairly new podcaster, I've been newslettering, I can't be newslettering, blogging for 14 years. And then I got into podcasting. So it's been about a year with podcasting. One of the things I'm trying to do is convert people who are reading into listening. Okay.
Right.
So there's different ways that you can put your transcript up. You can put it on the page. Some people do it as a download. You click and download a PDF. I'm not interested in that, because if you want something like that from me, you have to give me your email. But also, you're not then getting advantage of having the content on your website, because the PDF content isn't the same as words on your website page. So the transcript pages that I do are actual pages. So I'm not doing them as blogs in the system. They're simple pages that they can get to. And I refer to them as a way they can read the lesson, or sometimes I'll say, read the transcript. It has more words in it. So it is helpful to have that content on your website. It's got a keyword-rich title. We've done it a little different than the actual title, so it's all in there. When you have the blog, there's doing it as a blog, and you can put a transcript as a blog. It gives it all away if you put the whole content there. So you're not giving people any enticement to actually become a listener too. So what I prefer to see, and what I've done with my clients where we do the podcasting support for them, is we do kind of a recap, a summary of what they're going to learn. And then you have either the podcast embedded right there. They can click the play button, or we also put typically links to Apple, Spotify, all those kinds of things. So they can click and hit the play button on their favorite player. So when you have a summary, you're really trying to entice them to click and listen in, but you're giving some keyword information in there, but it's more of a recap of what they're going to learn if they listen in fully. The other option is you can make it more of a full and proper blog post and just not link to the podcast, but I wouldn't recommend that. I'd rather see the podcast embedded on that blog post page, so they can't, because ultimately as a podcaster, you want them clicking and listening, right?
Right. Yeah. To me, that's the ultimate goal. I just want to get them obsessed with the show.
Right.
That's where I'm at my best.
Yeah.
Okay. So I feel like we've talked about the why blogging is a great idea. 3 options for the how that we can explore. Yep. And that what you just said really adds clarity, because now I'm kind of a visual thinker and I go, okay, I see it. Kathy has a blog post that is her show notes, and the show notes link to the transcript. Is that sounding about okay? And then they're just spending that's a separate page, and they're spending more time on your website, which is always good. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about best practices and or worst practices, the things you like to see people doing, things you like to see people avoid doing when it comes to, and let's really look at like the newbie stuff, because I know a lot of people like myself are not blog experts at all. We just kind of like, tell me to do it, I'll do it. So where we'd like to start, let's dive in on some best practices or worst practices.
And actually, it's really interesting we're doing this topic right now, because I have a series on my podcast about creating content and articles, in particular blogs, and getting into formatting them. So if you follow the podcast, you'll be able to catch all of those. When you're creating your podcast show notes article or any blog, even if you're creating an actual blog, there's 7 things that I always tell people to look for that you include in what you're creating. Okay. Number one, keyword rich title is critical. When you put this on your website as a blog post, you want to have a subtitle as well. So it's kind of like a secondary, kind of your first thought is the title, your secondary thought is the subtitle. And that's going to go in H2 format. So if you have a blog on your website and an option for blogging, you have a way to put your words, the text that you have, into certain formats. H1 is always the title, typically on a website page for a blog. H2 is another option, and it's a high keyword rich area for the search engines to find what is this topic about. So you want to make sure that when you put this together, so it may be, there's a few different nuances as you put these things together as a podcast, the actual script, the blog, and then a newsletter. So when you put that together, you want this subtitle on there. You always want to have some sort of intro as well. So as you're thinking about making your podcast or whatever you're putting together, your show notes that you're looking to put on your system, and you're going to turn it into a blog, think about an intro to the article, to the topic, to the content you're going to share. What are they going to learn? How is it going to help them? What problem is it going to solve? You're kind of trying to give them the enticement to read, in this case, the same as you do promos for podcasts. That can be the thing that's going to get someone to click and play. And in fact, a lot of times my intros are my audiograms that I use to promote the podcast. I don't rewrite a lot. I reorganize it. Okay. Because I'm thinking about these 7 things before I put it together. Then you have the main content, like the meat of the lesson that you're teaching. Whether you do steps lesson, a story lesson, a testimonial lesson, I've got a list of 40 different types of ways you can put an article together as a blog post. There's lots of ways you can do things, right? It doesn't have to be the same old, same old. And then the key thing, and this is where it will typically come as you're planning your blog for your podcast, in the resources. That's going to be the spot that gives you your 5th element, which is internal links. Places that you want them to go on your website that take them to learn more. Read more on the transcript. Grab this free download. Book a free call with me. Things like that. You want them to have some of those that keep them on your website and devouring more information. It could be what I do as an anchor link. So if I say listen up, it pops them up to the top of my blog post where we've got the code embedded for the player, and they can hit the play button.
Okay.
So you keep them moving around here. Then, same as you do in your podcast, you want a little recap of what's there. So if you had a recap from your transcript or from your script, if you wrote one out, you use that in the section 2. Always give them a recap, or the moral of the story is what I call it, and tell them what they learned and what they can do. Give them their action steps next. And then it's a good thing to try and give them a call to action. And sometimes this is where the resources come into play. Sometimes I will add a different call to action in there. Maybe I have something specific I'm highlighting for a launch, or maybe I have a special boot camp happening, or maybe I have these last ones. I've given them, like I have an image of these 40 types of blog posts. So I have a call to action right in there that says, scroll down below and you can, download the image here with the 40 different types of blog post ideas. So you have something that tells them something to do. Ideally, those calls to action, I'm trying to get them on my list somehow.
Right.
To get that, to get that email address there. But sometimes, like this little series I'm doing, I've got a few images that I'm just giving them that are supportive pieces of the lesson. They're branded with my information. So if they download and take it, they still got some info there.
Okay.
So it's just trying to make sure that whatever you put into that, you have these 7 elements so that you're not skipping out on the important parts that are important for search engines. But when you put this together, you're using keyword rich content. You're using some of the keywords. You're talking about the problems clients have. And within that content, that's some of the stuff that will also help people if they're Googling, how do I do blah, blah, blah. The idea is that you come up in some of those search results.
Heck yes. Okay. You mentioned links.
Yep.
I'm link phobic because I've trained myself with like my email marketing, and same thing with calls to action on my podcast. I'm afraid to put any more than one thing in there.
Right.
So to me, I'm thinking, all right, internal links. And for those of you that may not be familiar with that term, that basically means linking to something that's on your website. That's not, we're not taking them off platform, we're keeping them on your platform. So to me, I'm thinking, I want some clickable stuff. So maybe I've got a previous blog post that, like, I see these a lot when I read. It's like, I talked about it here, and then it has just like, it's linked to another blog post or whatever. That's another resource on the page.
Right.
Or I mention a lead magnet, and you can get this lead magnet here, and just kind of link in there. But other than that, I mean, as far as like an off platform link, or like, what's a good, give me some linking protocols just so I can have something like goals, what to do, what not to do. Cause I get really nervous. Should there be, because I've been putting like my discovery call link at the bottom of each blog post, like, hey, if you're ready to work together, here's the great next step, blah, 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 blah. Should I be putting a whole bunch of links down there, like additional resources? Is that a good idea or no?
So it depends on what's in the content. If you talked about certain resources in the episode and you mention them, if they're going to be on the show notes page, you want them to show up there. You want them to be there. If you talk about episode 10, 189, 289, that's a big one, I believe, different ones like that. You have to make sure that you tell them about it, because if they want more and you don't give it to them, they're not going to stick around and explore. And that's what you have to think about it as. It's a way for them to take that lesson more. So it shouldn't necessarily be a set list of things. It needs to fit whatever you were talking about in the content. If the ideal thing is your podcast profit potential call, then you link to that and make that the call to action.
Right.
But if you did mention anything, in some of mine, I mentioned my ultimate content planner. If I don't put that in the show notes and I mentioned it, then they don't necessarily have a way to get it. And very few people are going to go and explore on your website and try to find it. You need to help them make the decision easy for the next step. So you just have to make it fit what's going on. Okay. And one thing that I teach my students is to have some cornerstone blog content, some articles that are big on, the biggest premise and the biggest principles or foundations that they deal with their clients all the time. So an example on this would be, I work with a lot of dietitians who are anti-diet dietitians and work in what's called the intuitive eating space, which you may know from your past wellness areas. So having an article on their website that says what is intuitive eating, that explains it, gives them a way to have, if they need some background. By the way, if you want to know more about intuitive eating, click here and read this article, What is Intuitive Eating? And they make that link. So it's a natural way to give somebody on your website, a visitor, more information. And ideally, that article will then, at the end of it, because every page or post on your website needs a call to action, a next step. So that main one, that what is intuitive eating, would have an action at the bottom, get my free guide or book a call or whatever it might be. As long as these fit, it doesn't mean you have to have 2 or 5 or 10. Like, I wouldn't have 10. Okay. But, so I wouldn't have too many, but they just need to make sense with what you have put in there, which is one of the reasons I teach people to have a call to action document. So you have various calls to action that you can, I'll just say to my VA, use, a call to action for the free stats tracking template. She'll go grab one that will fit. If I want to segue into it in a nice way because of a specific lesson that day, I will. Then it actually becomes a new CTA and goes in the document too.
Okay. That makes total sense. Yeah. So in my mind, I'm envisioning looking for opportunities. And I do the same thing. Like if I'm creating a podcast episode, I'm looking at the title, I'm like, here's what we're talking about, but how do I maximize keywords, and how do I maximize, like, is this a Google question format or whatever? So when I'm looking at my blog content, I need to look at keyword opportunities, Google word search term opportunities, internal link opportunities. Like, is there something mentioned, additional resources that keeps them on platform? And then having a single directed call to action that's very obvious, like this is the next best step. Does that feel like an okay format?
That is perfect.
Okay. Because I need systems, this. I thrive on systems, and you're a big systems person too, so that's good.
No, and that's the thing is, when you're putting these together, if you know those elements you want to make sure you include, like I have an article template that we follow in the academy, and that's what I teach people to do. And it helps you. There's all these spots, fill in the blanks kind of thing. And it helps you write your article, convert it to a newsletter, put it to a blog, and then create the social media from it all in one place. Because I'm a believer in the systems as well and batching work. And I know from how I've taught people over the years that if you're creating your content in the moment and can do a lot of the creation as one batch of work, you're going to spend less time on it, because when you come back 3 days later, you forgot what you wrote about. You're probably going to have to read the article again to pull out the social media posts or things like that. So do it all at once, right?
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
We are of the same mindset there. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about blogging platforms, because this is I feel like this is important, and like what gives us the best opportunity to be seen and have our content be actually seen by the people that we're searching. They're out there searching that we want to bring into our world. So what platforms do you like? What do you not like? Definitely talk about Kajabi. I know you have opinions about Kajabi. I'm on the Kajabi platform, but I am not married to it as far as a blog goes. So I will gladly swap out anything based off of your expert opinion. So what platforms do you like? What do we like or not like about Kajabi? Things like that.
So honestly, for me, the best blogging platform to have and use out there is one that uses WordPress. It's what it was built for. It was what it was intended for. And there are plugins galore that can help you do a lot more. The blogging platform on there works with categories and tags, different things like that. You can have SEO plugins that make it easier for you to do everything you need to do. That's my top choice, 100%. But I know there are people like you out there that have their whole domain on Kajabi, or there's Squarespace, there's Wix sites. I run into people using those all the time, because not everybody can afford to hire a web manager. Not everybody can afford to have someone, manage their WordPress site. And that is something you have to do. And Squarespace and Wix, they have things in it. They're limited on some of the SEO and the blogging capabilities, same as Kajabi. Kajabi doesn't have categories, and that's a big part of, keyword content attached to your blog posts, is having the categories that you can put into it. You can put a bunch of tags. They just don't work in the same way on the Kajabi site as they would on a WordPress site.
Okay.
But there are ways out there. Like I've had clients that have used Flywheel hosting, for instance, and they're a managed WordPress hosting site. So you get your hosting for your domain through them, but they have a feature where they do the updates for you, and they do that as a service for, I think, about $8 a month. That's not too bad, but there are lots of web managers out there that do services as well. Because when you have a WordPress site, if you don't know what you're doing, updating plugins and themes and all of that, you can kill your website in a heartbeat when things aren't going well. So not knowing that and not understanding that is a problem. And that's where people go to the DIY versions like the Squarespace and stuff, where you don't need that extra tech support.
Right.
They're okay to have there. They just don't have as much functionality that you can organize the layout and you can set things up. Kajabi is very limited. We have one client that has some blogs on there, and I don't even like to look at it. I just because it puts like the huge image there and a little title, so you can't make anything look really smooth and a nice layout with it. You're limited with what they have, but that's because they specialize in courses. That's
right.
their thing. So for someone like you that has your main website there, and I did kind of look a little more and explore as much as I could to find any kind of blog kind of setup that you had on there, or, even your podcast links and show notes. And I personally think, you don't have much there. You have some highlighted episodes, it looks like, but that's it, right? Your top ones that you want people to watch all the time. Whereas if you come to a site like mine, you have a whole list of them. You can keep going back and look through there. They're all there, and they're all there with keyword rich URLs and keyword rich titles and SEO on every one of them and categories and tags and a focus keyword SEO for SEO. So those are all added elements I get to put on mine that help the search engines know what's on that domain, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's hard not to recommend that because it's just built for it, right?
Okay. Now, let's say people are listening in. They're like, okay, need a WordPress deal to get the blog going to kind of be optimized. Can't do it myself. Need to hire a social media manager.
You need to hire a website manager for that.
Website manager. That's what I meant. What do you recommend going for that? What kind of price point are we looking at there?
That can vary. I mean, that's, website building websites and managers is challenging. It's something we used to do. I think I've told you before, I let go a lot of clients and a lot of team members and cut back a lot. You can get people to build websites for 500, 1,000, 50,000, it just depends on who they are and what you're looking for. I can, definitely shout out the person that I work with. But she may not be a fit for everybody either. And there's tons of people out there that have this specialty. My big thing is never let an expert in something or somebody who's going to help you create a website or set up an email list or a course convince you to go with the only thing they know, because that's all they know. It may not be the best thing for you. I see that a lot that happens out there.
Yeah.
But it can be challenging. And there are good web designers out there and there are bad web designers out there. And there are people that understand how to put messaging and SEO together and there are people that don't. So you have to do a lot of due diligence in finding someone.
That makes sense. That's always good advice. Okay. So as we kind of enter the home stretch here, I am seeing, like, as I put up blog posts, and I do use Kajabi, and that's the only frame of reference that I have. So I don't know if this applies to all blog posts or not, but there are a few terms that are popping up that I wanted to get your input on, and it kind of like, let's play a game of, is this important or is this not important? So, so one thing I see popping up, it's alt image text or attribute. So there's the blog image and there's something underneath that says alternate image text or attribute.
Never,
is that important?
Ever skip that. Never, ever. That is a high keyword rich area.
All right. So this is important, in fact.
Very important.
Okay.
Every image you put on any spot on your website, any page, any post, anywhere, alt text always. And it should describe the image and be keyword rich if it makes sense. It is also an area that helps with I can never say it right, accessibility for folks that have vision impairments. Because the images may not come up, but their readers can read the alt text underneath it.
Okay. So if my image is usually the title of the blog post, do I just put the title of the blog post in there as written text? Is that?
Or part of it. Yeah. The keyword rich part of it. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Important. I will highlight that in green. We're a go. Organization tags. You mentioned this with Kajabi, they have a thing. I can put this blog is business tips. The next one is social media marketing or something like that. Important, not important.
It is. What you're missing there is categories. So if you want to think about it this way, categories are kind of the broad topic you would be talking about. Podcasting tips, podcasting business, starting a podcast.
Right.
Those are some of your categories. And then the tags are a little deeper down into the next level, sort of a subtitle, if you will. How to grow your podcast could be a tag. Then there are some thoughts on tags as something that people shouldn't be using as much or not. Yoast SEO is a plugin on WordPress, and they have tons of good articles and blogs on their website, YOAST. And they have some really good information there that is just foundational learning about SEO in particular for blogging. So it's a good spot to go. But just look at it this way. Usually what I'll tell people is have 2, maybe 3 categories, and you can have 5 to 10, 15 tags even. They're keyword rich. They all end up becoming their own URL within a WordPress site. That's some of what you're missing on the Kajabi side of it. And by no means am I an expert on all of that, but it is a piece of what we do and what we make sure people put into what they're putting out on their blogs.
Okay.
And people can put tag clouds on, your website. Again, this is more of a WordPress feature, but I can put a list of categories so people can click, open the drop-down list and go to blogging tips, or go to marketing strategy or marketing plans as categories. And then it will pull up all of the blogs in latest order to oldest that are on blogging, planning, or marketing strategy. So that's one of the nice features about a WordPress site, is that ability to use plugins to do things like that help your user have a good experience.
All right. Green highlight that one. All right. I have a feeling this next one's going to be a green highlight. The custom URL. So there's like this little thing that's like custom URL. I assume this is important. The best practices. Like, do I always put I know in podcast terms, I always show up in podcast search engines for podcasting tips.
Yeah.
Should I try to include that over and over and over again, and then what the tips are about, or what's a strategy here?
You don't want to overstay your welcome with keywords in your URLs, because you'll run out of unique ones. Your URL shouldn't include stop words. A lot of systems, WordPress included, will put in what we call stop words: a, the, and, if, things like that. Take those out 100%. I like to adjust mine, all of them, and put kind of the top keywords in it that also make it a unique URL. So I'm not going to repeat it if I happen to be talking about it on another one. Okay. So if you had, what's one of your most recent episodes, Adam?
Facebook and Instagram ads strategies for podcasters.
So Facebook-Instagram-ads-podcasting.
Okay.
Something like that would be good for you. Okay.
So we're taking out filler words, stop words, and we are just looking at keywords and making sure, obviously,
they match the content.
Yeah, matches the content, and it won't let you repeat the same URL over. Is that
no?
Okay, no. So that's built in. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, and so with my titles, I feel like I need to have the word podcaster, podcasting, or podcast in there pretty much every time. Does that make sense?
If your title doesn't say it, it's not necessarily a word you should have in the title on the blog. Okay. The title that you enter as your blog title should really become the SEO title, or in your case on Kajabi, I think it's called the page title too. There's 2 spots where you can put it in there.
Yeah.
It should really be the same on both of them. And you should pointedly enter it in both spots so you don't leave anything to chance. But if your title of your podcast episode doesn't have the word podcasting in it, you don't necessarily want to make that the title, because you risk the search engines thinking you're stuffing keywords everywhere and not being natural. So they want, if you ever look up Google's helpful content update, it happened, I think, in 2022. They want more natural stuff is what they're looking to see in your content. So natural storytelling, natural writing, authentic voice. So if you have a title of a podcast that doesn't have the word podcasting tip in it, making that the URL could actually work against you. Okay.
All right. And you repeat what you said about the page titles. That was my next question of, is this worth it or not? And so what is that the same as? That should be the same as our URL or the title of the blog?
The title of your blog is when you go to write a blog, whether it's on Kajabi or WordPress, anywhere, you put a title in. That becomes the title there.
Right.
But in most places, Kajabi included, there's another spot you can put the SEO title in. Typically, they're just going to be the same thing.
Okay, great. So that we cross that one off. What about page description?
Very important. These are all important, just saying.
I thought they may be, but I'm just making sure. If there's anything I don't have to do, I'm like, all right, cool. I don't have to do that.
Page description. You can't always be guaranteed what you're going to enter here will show up in the search engine results page, but that's what you're looking for. Think about when you go to Google and you type in a question that you have, and you get your search engine results page up there, your SERP. Okay. When you're deciding what to click on, you'll see a title at the top. That's your title. And you'll see 2 lines. That's the description. I always look at that as almost a commercial or an enticement line or a spot where you give people a reason to click on it. If you don't enter anything in, it will typically fill in the first beginning words of whatever content is on that page. And this goes for pages too, by the way. Okay. So when you don't fill it in, it's kind of up to chance as to what will show up there. So if you have something funny or weird at the beginning of your content, that's what's going to show up there. So if you put it in as a pointed thing, I think of it as same as a social media, like a blog promotional post. One sentence that will entice people to click on it. Give them almost the recap of what they're going to learn and why they want to click it, because it's going to help them solve a problem.
Okay. I love that. That's it's just a little appetizer. Good.
It is. And when you think about it, if you go search for anything, what makes you decide to click on a link? It's those 2 lines, right?
Okay.
It's the title and the 2 lines. That's where you decide between the first one, the third one, the fifth one, or you're skipping a page, or you redo your search because you're not getting what you want.
Right.
That's a really important area.
All right. Last thing, I was just curious about best practices of the blog image, like the cover image of the blogs. I know with like YouTube that you want certain things, like with the cover art image of having something kind of splashy with a face reaction and blah, blah, blah. Like, so like simple things like, should I put the title of the blog in the blog image, even though it's already written in the title line, things like that?
I don't like to.
Okay.
So I definitely don't like to. The method that I teach people is we don't actually create title images for blog posts. We create images that we'll be able to use in our social media marketing so we can repurpose them. So we'll pointedly think of a couple image ideas. So for me, when I write my article, I list out 5 image ideas that I have. We have a couple standard ones, my takeaway image. We have a steps image we'll use for a carousel, but we have 3 other ones that will be something that if I want to use it on its own, it will stand alone as a tip that could go out there on an image, but it can support what's in the blog or the podcast as well. So I like to put something that is going to be a visual that supports the message. And part of the thing with images on blogs, it depends on your blog setup where the image is going to show. Some will automatically show at the top of the article. Some will show in the feed of the article. They will show differently. So you really have to know how that's going to work as to how you're going to see it. I like to put a couple images in a blog post to break up the content, right? Yeah. It's all about formatting it so people can easily read and skim and try to get as much information as they skim, because they will skim and read. So if you've got, a standout point that you want to make, put it into an image and put that in the middle of the blog post. And by the way, you're going to use that same image on your social media content with a caption to go with it. So you're repurposing what you do there.
Yes, the queen of repurposing. All right. So let's say that there is a listener out there and we have won them into the way of blogging. And they're like, I've never done this before. Where do they start? Like, what's the first strategic step that they need to take to make this actually happen?
You have to think about what your purpose is for it, because your purpose and goals for blogging and putting the information out there is going to drive what you're going to create. So you can't start without knowing what that is, for sure. The way that I teach folks, and I've been doing this, like I said, I think it started with episode 50 on my podcast with what to do if you only have 1 hour a week to do marketing. So we started with that one, and then I've gone into a little series. It's not quite done all live yet when we're recording this, but I'm sure it will be by the time anybody listens. But I take them through a process where you create a content bucket of topic ideas. So this is basically another 1 hour lesson where you can brainstorm ideas that will give you enough content for a year for most people. So then you've got your ideas. Then you want to think about what you're going to put into the content. So you replace all that as blogging specific with your podcast specific aspect of it. Your podcast ideas really become the blogs if you're a podcaster, in my opinion. Yeah. You don't necessarily want to double it up. in your case, you've got those extra newsletters that you do. I do think you should double those up and put them as blog posts out there.
Okay.
Just maybe not on your Kajabi site. But that's a challenge because it means then you've got to have double foundations, right? So it's hard to do that. So, I mean, if it's what you have and you have to go with it, then go with it. Just know that there's going to be stuff with that may not necessarily be ideal, but it's better than nothing. Right.
Yeah.
And once you have this and you know that you're going to do this, you've got to get in my opinion, you have to get a system in place. We both love them. There's a reason for it. It saves you time. It saves you money. It saves you from over creating stuff and not creating enough stuff. You do, the Goldilocks method is just what you need, the perfect amount to get what you need done. And just start simple. I always tell people start, with once a month creating that new content. So if somebody is brand new to podcasting or blogging or hasn't done either one, I feel like podcasters would have some sort of process, Adam. Like it's just they haven't gone to the blogging part of it, right?
Yeah.
So at that point, it's just a method of figuring out how to take what you're doing as your podcast process and put the blog part in a middle spot there. That's how I would look at it, doing it for a podcaster who's new.
Yeah.
If you're a person that hasn't done either one of them, just starting out with an idea is where you got to start there.
Yeah.
And then deciding, are you going to do it for every episode? How much, how are you going to format that blog? What's going to be in there for content? And then having a system just to make it seamless as part of the whole process as a podcaster.
Beautifully said, Kathy. I do think that most podcasters have kind of a workflow, and this is just that next check box or next 2 or 3 check boxes of what we're delegating to a VA or what we're doing to create a little snippet of a piece of content to transform into a blog. So very doable, very doable. Yeah. I'm going to continue the experiment. For now, if you guys want to see what I'm doing on the blog, you can just go to my main website, and it's kind of like in the middle of the page. I think it does the latest 3 blog posts. I've got 8 or 9 of them done so far. So just go to the website, podcastingbusiness.school. Speaking of websites and connection information, more importantly, Kathy, you've dispensed so much information. If people are like, I need to tag this woman in, I need to get some help with this. Where do people go to connect with you? Where do you want to send them to come get into your world?
So my main website is pepperitmarketing.com. And that is where you'll find me, my podcast, all my free resources as well. I've got some things to get you started there. The podcast is Marketing Your Private Practice with Kathy C. And you can find that at marketingyourprivatepractice.com. And I always tell people my niche is working with practitioners, therapists, dietitians, nutritionists, but service-based business owners fit into that world as well. So you can definitely get a lot out of what we have there. And I offer a free marketing review if people, if you want to book a time with me, we do it in the same way Adam does. It is a podcast episode, but we can always talk about what are some of your struggles with putting the blogging into your podcasting system and what you've got going now and how you can make it as easy as possible.
Yes. And I cannot recommend Kathy highly enough. Like her stuff and the people that she's working with, they're crushing it. So take advantage of that marketing audit. My goodness, like definitely do that, because that is that's a steal for you all to be able to spend some time like that with Kathy. So shameless plug. Kathy, you are somebody I've really enjoyed getting to know. I'm so proud of you. Like the way that your brand and show is growing as a podcaster, and then being able to have you on to dispense your knowledge in the blogging world. That's been pretty, we're coming full circle.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your time spent with the people of Podcasting Business School here today, the Pod Pals.
All right,
everybody. So we've given you a lot to think about. As always, try to organize your information, think about that next logical step and take action on that so we can move forward, whether we're going to do blogging or not. And I hope you give it a try. All right. So with that, I think that's a good place to put a pin in this conversation. I'm going to send you out into the world, wishing you health, happiness, and many downloads and blogs. We'll see you on the next episode.